Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good to be here with you all. Baruch Hashem, we have soon, and we can be here in one accord. And let me see, you don't see me on the screen. Now you will see me. Yes. Okay. Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. This parasha contains three beautiful stories, three verses, and at the same time, it has three deaths as well. First, the death of Sarah, and also we have later on in this parasha the death of Abraham, and also his son with Hagar, Ishmael, is mentioned. He also dies. The second is Abraham entrusting his servant to go on a quest to find the right wife for his son Isaac, the first Jewish child. And finally, then comes to the last periods of Abraham's life, his death, as I mentioned before, or the three deaths. Abraham, after losing his beloved wife, falls into a deep mourning and reflects the depth of his relationship with Sarah. The love and faithfulness Abraham and Sarah had for one another. Together, they embarked on a long journey to an unknown destination. Together, they stood against all odds, idolatry of their time. Twice, Sarah saved Abraham's life by pretending to be his sister. They hope and pray for a child, and they endured long years of childlessness until Isaac was born. Then Sarah dies. Abraham negotiates and buys a piece of land, the cave of Machpela in Hebron, in which she is buried until this day, along with her husband. Just I want to tell you a little bit about the cave of Machpela. Has an ancient history. It is believed that not only our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried there, but also Adam and Eve, along with them. So we have Adam and Eve and these three holy couples, Abraham and Sarah, Rebekah and Isaac, Jacob and Leah. Since biblical times, the cave of Machpela has been a place of prayer, meditation, and study. The cave is respected as a gateway to the Garden of Eden, where our prayers have a special potency. Hebron was the capital of the tribe of Judah. King David began his kingship there. From Hebron, he was crowned king of Judah 7 years later before he was crowned king of Israel in Jerusalem. Going back to Abraham, and even though God promised Abraham the whole land, the act of purchasing this piece, this grave site, we can call it, is an act of faith in God's promises. He secures a burial site for his wife in the land that God already promised him. It will be his and his descendants. It will be his descendants. Many of us have had the privilege of having long-standing marriages. And some of us have also had the painful experience of losing that partner in crime, your other half. And some of us also can relate to childlessness for a season. Some perhaps never had a child. As funny as this may be sound, not only Sarah endured the difficulty of having a child, we also see the rest of our matriarchs that were childlessness for a season. We see Rebekah, and we see later Rachel. And interestingly enough, Rachel had her child, and then she begged and prayed for another child. Eventually, she loses her life when she has this second child. So even if you do have one child, two, or none, I assure you that God knows exactly what he's doing. He gave us free will. Nevertheless, he knows exactly what he does from the beginning. And yet, after we seen all our matriarchs having a hard time having children, God blessed them and opened their wombs. In Genesis 24, God's promises continue. Abraham sends his servant to find a wife for Isaac. The servant's mission illustrates God's intervention and his covenant to Abraham's family through Isaac. Abraham didn't want a Canaanite wife for his son. Abraham's servant, likely Eliezer, he found Rebekah in the town of Nahor and brought her back to Abraham's household. Rebekah, like Abraham, makes a journey of faith. She willingly leaves her family and her homeland to marry Isaac, a man she has never met. Back then, we didn't have iPhones. You couldn't call him and say, okay, yes, I like him, let me go. Not at all. It was a walk by faith. This mirrors the journey of faith when we trust God without seeing. When we trust God even without seeing him face to face. As Rebekah sees Isaac in the distance, we are told that he is coming from the way of Ber Laharoi, well of the living one who sees me. Genesis 24:62. He comes down to meditate in the field. The placement is surprising. Thus far, we have situated the patriarchal family at Beersheba, to which Abraham returns after the binding of Isaac, and Hebron, where Sarah dies and is buried. What happened to Sarah then? We open up the Parashah, this Torah portion, Sarah is dead. You know, what happens to him? We know that the Midrash says that the rabbis say that in the opening words that Sarah died at 127, and they put it beautiful. This is just beautiful. They tell us that Sarah at 100, she was as vigorous and beautiful as a woman of 20. And at the age of 20, she has the innocence of a sweet girl of 7 years old. A 7-year-old beautiful girl. Don't you want to age that way? I do. You know. The Midrash also explains that she didn't die from a physical cause, but pure grief. That she suffered this grief as a result of what happened in the previous Torah, the previous parashah, the binding of Isaac. The Midrash notes that from the moment that Abraham packed and took his son, she couldn't handle it. Not like Abraham precisely went and told her, hey, Sarah, I'm going to Isaac because he told me. No. Also, the Midrash says that somebody else, was stirring the pot and gave her the message. She couldn't handle it and she dropped. She just passed. She's gone. When Isaac asked his father, hey, what is the offering? What I like about this specific moment, Abraham assured Isaac, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. Even then, Abraham believed in the power of the tongue. He saw that his eyes couldn't see. You have always heard me saying, be careful with what you see. Be careful with what you say. The power of the tongue. The tongue is tiny. Okay, not that tiny. But it has power. Be careful with you confess with your mouth. It has power. Abraham assured Isaac, God will give us whatever he wants us to sacrifice. And after this, Sarah is not mentioned again. She never knew that the sacrifice never happened and that Isaac returned safe and sound to the family in Beersheba. The anguish killed Sarah. So now going back to Rebekah, that she saw Isaac, Rebekah asked the servant, "Who is that man who's walking in the field to meet us?" Probably he was a good looking. By then, Isaac was already 40 years old. Rebekah was, you know, according to commentaries, she was 14. So when the servant told him, "Oh, that's my master, that's the man that you're going to marry," so she covered herself. So she took the veil and covered herself. Then the servant recounted to Isaac all the things he had done. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after the loss of his mother. Between Sarah's death and Isaac marrying with Rebekah is apparently 3 years. So in Genesis 25, Abraham's later years and death says, we expected that Abraham lived the rest of his life, the rest of his years, before going, alone. We expected that. But no, he didn't. Abraham marries a woman named Keturah and has more children, who also receive blessings, gifts. We are told nothing about these women, nothing at all. And actually, this part is unclear. The Torah does not include details about Abraham, how he looked like, how he managed, nothing. We know nothing about this new wife, and how after loving and losing his beloved Sarah, he just goes and embarks in a new relationship. Talking about relationship, because he loses his wife, in a study of 350 widows and widowers, 61% of men and 19% of women were either remarried or involved in a new relationship within 25 months after losing their spouse. The median time to remarriage is 1.7 years for men and 3.5 years for women. This is funny. I have seen men getting married in less than 6 months, remarrying. I have seen 2 or 3. I don't remember now. Factors that predict remarriage. Higher income and education levels were predictors for men, while greater psychological well-being was correlated with remarriage for both men and women. Some reasons for the gender gap in remarriage includes partner availability. There are more older women than men, and many women face demographic obstacles to remarry. Men are more likely to have fewer friends than women and may rely on their wife as the primary source of emotional and social support. Women in their 60s are less likely than men to remarry. Regardless of gender, people who remarry after the death of a spouse report lower levels of depression and greater life satisfaction and well-being than those who don't. So now going back to Abraham, now that you have the background, nowadays, can you imagine back then? Even though he remarries, Isaac remains the child of the covenant. Abraham's later years show God's blessing, and Isaac alone is identified as God's chosen one. Keep that in mind. Isaac and Ishmael come together to bury Abraham. How come? Just last Parashah, we found out that Sarah told Abraham, get rid of that child and his mother. So, all of a sudden, he's back? So, Genesis 21:11-12. Now the matter was very displeasing to Abraham. As a mother or as a father, can you imagine somebody said, "Oh, get rid of that child"? I ain't liking it. It's not easy. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be displeased about the boy and your slave women. Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her voice, for through Isaac shall your seed be called. The Midrash explains that Ishmael, while in his father's house, he was inclined to do things that Abraham considered wrong. Ishmael even prayed to idols when he thought that nobody was watching. Sarah observed this and realized that he was a bad influence for his young Isaac. Therefore, she implored Abraham to send Ishmael away. Abraham understood the reason for his wife's request, but he feared that sending his son might become even worse. However, God told Abraham to do what Sarah just asked. And Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away, providing them with water and food for the journey. There is another extraordinary midrash that tells us that Abraham visited Ishmael twice after he was kicked out from Beersheba. On this first occasion, Ishmael was not at home. His wife, not knowing who Abraham was, refused the stranger bread and water. This was tradition of the season. If you see somebody coming by, swinging by, you will give them, offer to wash their feet, offer water, offer bread, and they will give you, a couple of coins, something in there. Ishmael, when he learned that, he divorced this woman and he marries a new woman, Fatima. In this second occasion, when Abraham goes, knocks on the door, hypothetically speaking, the woman gave him food and drink. The Midrash says, Abraham stood and prayed before God, and Ishmael's house became filled with all good things. When Ishmael returned, his wife told him about it, and Ishmael knew that his father still loved him, and that father and son were reconciled. Could be, couldn't be. This is, like I mentioned it before, this is what the Midrash said. Ishmael's presence at the burial of his father is just surprising. And he went into the desert because he went to the desert years before when Isaac was young. Until now, we have assumed that the two half-brothers had lived in total isolation from one another. Yet, the Torah placed them together at his father's funeral. So our sages gave us a beautiful explanation. First, they point out that at Berhala Roy, the place from where Isaac was coming when Rebekah saw him, is the same spot where Hagar was fleeing from Sarah when she was pregnant and encountered the angel. And Hagar is the one that gives that place that name. Genesis 16:13 through 14. So she called Adonai, who was speaking to her, "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "Would I have gone here indeed looking for him who looks after me?" That is why the well is named the well of the living one who sees me. The Midrash also continues saying that Isaac went to Beer-lahai-roi in search of Hagar. He was looking for Hagar. When Isaac heard that his father was seeking a wife for him, for Isaac, Isaac says, "Shall I marry and leave my father alone? I will go look for Hagar so she can stay with him." So who was Keturah? She was, they said, the rabbis, no other than Hagar herself. It is not unusual for people in the Torah to have more than one name. And we know this. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had 7 names, and we see him through the Torah. We see it even in the prophets. Hagar was called Keturah because her acts gave forth fragrance like incense, so therefore Keturah comes from the word Ketoret. This indeed integrates Abraham's second marriage as an essential component of the narrative. Muslim historians have written about Hagar According to their accounts, Hagar was Abraham's wife and the mother of his first son, Ishmael. Dun, dun, dun. She is now mentioned by the name in their holy book. We know what's the name of their holy book, but she's referenced through the story of Abraham. According to Islam, Abraham has a vision, and that he is to sacrifice his son Ishmael. He tells Ishmael about the vision, and Ishmael agrees to be sacrificed. Sounds familiar? When Ishmael is about to be killed, God intervenes and applauds Abraham and Ishmael for the devotion and obedience. In Islam, Ishmael is considered a prophet. Is also praised for being patient, good, and righteous. And yes, in Islam also, Isaac is considered to be a prophet, and he's described as a gift from God to Abraham, alongside with his brother Ishmael, and both are righteous descendants of Abraham. Judaism and Islam share many similarities, including monotheism, holy cities, dietary laws, prayer, circumcision, fasting, charity, modesty, and so the list go on. So why so much controversy between these two religions until this day, these two ways of life until this day? Judaism originated in the Middle East over 3,500 years ago. According to the tradition, Abraham, the biblical patriarch, is the founder of Judaism. Abraham is said to have established the covenant with God, and God gave the Jewish people the Torah through Moses at Mount Sinai. Islam is about 1,400 years ago, 1,400 years ago, originating in the 7th century, the Common Era, when Muhammad received his first revelation from an angel, Gabriel, making the beginning of the religion according to Islamic tradition. So you are right. Ishmael didn't start Islam. Islam sounds like Islam. No, Islam. According to the Midrash, Hagar didn't end her days as an outcast. She returned at Isaac's suggestion and with Abraham's agreement, and becomes the wife of her former master. This also changes the painful story of the banishment of Ishmael. What about the other sons? Why Ishmael is the only one that is accounted, even though God clearly says that his covenant, the chosen one, is Isaac, and everything that belonged to Abraham was Isaac's, no other sons. Let's go back to Genesis 25:12, this Parashah, that I found it fascinating. Now, these are the genealogies of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian slave girl, bore to Abraham. In my humble opinion, Ishmael is also blessed, not because he's Abraham's son. The other ones were not blessed as Ishmael was blessed. But the only reason why Ishmael is also part of this blessing is because he was conceived with Sarah's blessing. She gave her husband to this slave woman. She told her husband, hey, I'm not having children. I'm old. I have my beautiful young servant. I want to have children of my own. She was acting like she wanted to be God in a way. So that's why sometimes we have to wait for God and let our impetus, our desire to do things right now, sometimes we just need to step back and wait. Anyway, the point here, in my humble opinion again, is that the only reason why Ishmael was also blessed is because Sarah blessed in a way that relation. She gave this woman to Abraham to lay, to have a child. And this is why also God said to Abraham, in my opinion as well, listen to your wife. God knows already what is going to happen in the future and exactly knows our heart. He gives us free will at all the time. Actually, always. We have a choice to choose good or evil, to live or die. Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, is the only Torah portion named after a woman. This parashah highlights the importance of Sarah's legacy and her role as the matriarch of the Jewish people, and this role of women in our society. The hidden story of Chayei Sarah has immense consequence for our time. Jews and Muslims both trace their descendants from Abraham. Jews through Isaac, Muslims through Ishmael. The fact that both sons stood together at their father's funeral tell us that they too were reunited. It doesn't mean that they were inseparable after Abraham's burial, perhaps amicable relatives. The genealogy of Ishmael acknowledged God's plan for all people, the nations. The messianic message is one of reconciliation, as Yeshua brings peace to all families of the earth, including the descendants of Ishmael. Paul echoes this in Ephesians 2:14. For he is our shalom, the one who made the two into one and broke down the middle wall of separation. Within his flesh, he made powerless the hostility. Sometimes we have no idea of the great power that we do have as Messianic believers. What a privilege. What Yeshua said is always resonating. Many people that do know Messiah, and many times they choose not to hear him again, or just to remove him completely from their lives. Yeshua says, my sheep hears my voice and they follow me. I'm paraphrasing here. Perhaps this Devar Torah was a bit different. Perhaps many are not agreeing with me, mentioning so many commentaries about Hagar and Ishmael. And that's okay. Commentaries help us to understand a book that was written long ago, that have a different way of thought and action. Everything evolves, absolutely everything. Everything changes. Bibles that were written 100 years ago have to even change the way that they're written now so we can reach the masses, and in between we lose. We need to keep up to date. There is so much discord about what's happening in the Middle East, not only between Israel and Gaza. This has become a global issue, with so many people just protesting and attacking Jews all over the world. And for the most part, a lot of people remains quiet. I'm very happy to hear we have people, and I know somebody in our shul, that she's always in prayer lines, always going to march and speaking up and raising out her voices. If there is 10 Zoom prayer lines for Israel, she's in 11 of them because she also attended the one that wasn't posted. And Baruch Hashem, and that's a blessing, because we need to keep praying for Israel. We need to wake up and smell the coffee, because if you see the news, a lot of news are not giving you the real news. Anyway, going back to the problem with Israel and Gaza, there's a lot of attacks against Jews. I could say that many are agreeing with what is happening to Jews in Israel and around the world because of what's happening in Gaza. They keep fighting a fight that they don't know what it's about. You see many protesters on the streets claiming and standing against Israel, protesting and they don't know what they're fighting for. They don't know the story behind. They don't know what is happening there because they have never been there. Never, ever in their lives. You don't know the difference in Israel when you walk in Israel, how Israel is. If you have never been to Israel, if you have never lived in Israel, if you have never mingled with people or have friends that you have gone and slept in their homes or be in their hotels, if you have not done this, you can see the difference of how people live. Go and experience. I want all those protesters, all those that are crying, I would like them, why don't you go to Gaza and see what happens and see who's doing what? That will be very interesting. Please, in the meantime, I do urge everybody to keep sharing, to keep speaking up. Today is 59 weeks since the October 7 attack. And a lot of people is chilling now. A lot of people is chilling. A lot of people, we are not. We keep fighting. We keep posting. We keep we keep praying. We keep hoping that next Shabbat they will be at home with their families, lighting their candles. Just for 1 second, imagine you being in their position, in their situation. Just for 1 second, for 1 day. It has been 59 weeks, for God's sakes. And people are crying, genocide. It's upsetting. It's upsetting. It's upsetting again what is happening to Benjamin Netanyahu. Because now what? He cannot defend the state of Israel. He cannot defend its citizens when he's being bombarded from right, left, north, south, everywhere. Shame on the ICC. Shame on them. Because we shouldn't be. Shame on me too as well. Shame on them. Because it's a lot of women in Gaza being raped day and night. Not only the ones that were taken from their home, but the ones that they live in that place. They abuse women and children. We need to stop supporting terrorism. Anyway, going back to Israel, we need to remember, Israel indeed is the only democracy in the Middle East fighting back terrorism. And the world is crying that Israel is committing genocide. We cannot say that about Israel's neighborhood countries. Look around Israel. We cannot say the same. Remember, history repeats itself. And when Israel fights back, it's because it's defending its people. And when I say it's defending its people, it's not only defending Jews, but it's defending Muslims, it's defending Christians, and it's defending everyone that lives in Israel. Israel is not only Jews around. It's like New York. People from all over the world that are coming, settle, they have their kids, and they are Israelis as well. And they have the right to participate in anything that is in the country. Is the only democracy in the Middle East. Anyway, on that note, let me close my sermon. Just as Abraham trusted God with Sarah's burial, Isaac's marriage, and his own legacy, believers are called to have faith in God's promises, even when fulfillment seems distant. And it does seem distant sometimes. Rebekah's decision to join Abraham's family is a reminder that joining God's covenant is a personal decision. As she left her home, her bed, her mom, her dad, to embrace God's promises. Isaac and Ishmael's reunion foreshadows the unity of Messiah, that reunity that Messiah will bring. Yeshua is our peace and calls his followers to be peacemakers. And here is where I would like to open the opportunities to all of us. We have a bigger weapon created long ago, the power of prayer. And as Messianic Jews, we have the power of Yeshua. Yes, Yeshua has power. No Jesus, no Jesus, Yeshua. Why Yeshua? Because Yeshua does mean salvation. It has a meaning. The power of Yeshua, if you knew Yeshua from the moment that you were born, if you know Yeshua now, do not to the side. Acknowledge him because you have a gift. We're in between. We're in the middle. We are the bridge, as I mentioned it before. Yeshua is the light of this world. Oh, by the way, now Muslims, they want to claim also that Yeshua is Palestine. He's not a Jew. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? What else they want to take from us? What else they want to change around? I don't think it was meant to be to change this so much. Yes, different nations. I don't think that was the message from the beginning, because we have free will and distorted the whole thing. And when I say we, I don't mean it as itself, just people creating different things. Anyway, now Muslims are claiming Yeshua as a Palestine. My message to everybody that says that is, let's make Yeshua great again. Yeshua is a Jew. Yeshua was a Jew. And yes, he is our Messiah. And he is here, not only for the Jew, but also for the nations. This parasha encapsulates the themes of faith, promise, a covenant for the chosen people, a reconciliation between Isaac and Ishmael, a reconciliation between Judaism and Islam. After all, Abraham loved both of his sons and was laid to rest by both in the cave of Machpela. So there is hope in the future. There is hope for the future in this story of the past. God's faithfulness and mercy are displayed, inviting both Jew and the nations to join in his redemptive plan. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.